So I literally just got the iPhone 14 Pro Max from my local Apple store and have been testing it for the past few hours. What is interesting is that you do have a local SIM card, which is on every other iPhone except for the US models. I do understand why the push to eSIM. Anyways, thankfully in Singapore we do have the iPhones with the SIM card. Okay, without further ado, let's jump straight into the video with the headlining feature, Dynamic Island. So Dynamic Island, as Apple calls it, is basically a pill-shaped cutout at the top of the iPhone which intelligently dynamically change depending on the notification you receive. So for example, receiving an incoming call, connecting to AirPods, using Face ID, or even listening to music, the Dynamic Island will change depending on the app you are using. So you can also use the cutout for multitasking in between apps. So for example, let's say you are recording a voice memo and you also want to set a timer at the same time. So all you do is open up both apps, open maybe the voice memos apps first, then open the timer and set a timer, and you'll be able to multitask between the two apps. So for example, let's say you want to interact with the Dynamic Island. All you do is long press to get the widget that you always find on previous iPhones, or tap once and you will get into the app itself. So the Dynamic Island also works with most popular music streaming services such as Spotify, YouTube Music, Apple Music, Tidal. So what it does is whenever you swipe up, you'll have the album art as well as the waveform at the side of the album art, so you do get a very nice clean look. Finally, if you use the microphone or open up the camera, the indicators will be in between the pill-shaped cutout as well. As a matter of fact, here are the things that Apple they provide to reviewers that will show up on the Dynamic Island as of recording today. Pretty sweet, as there are a bunch of 30 plus notifications that will show up. So pretty sweet. It's definitely something that many companies will try to replicate or copy in the next coming months or next coming years, or maybe in a new software update. Alright, so with the Dynamic Island comes the always on display. Now I know Android has had it for years now, and Apple users has just started to get used to the always on display, starting with the Apple Watch Series 6, but Apple does do it a bit differently, like how they always implement stuff late but tend to do it a little bit better. So this time it is actually not a black screen like most Androids, which only has a clock and probably a few notification icons. What Apple did is a bit different. What it does is that it dims the entire lock screen, so you will be able to still preserve the color as well as the skin tones on your wallpapers. However, it just dims the screen, so you will still be able to view your notifications and the beauty of your wallpaper. I know some people might not really like this implementation of the always on display, but personally I do like Apple's take on the always on display. However, if you don't like it, you can turn it off in the settings. Now Apple's always on display also works intelligently. So for example, if you leave your phone on the table for a while and leave your phone in a pocket, you'll be able to turn off the always on display. So that's pretty sweet and will probably help you to save a little bit of battery life. Speaking of battery life, the iPhone 14 Pro Max does seem to have a slightly worse battery life compared to the 13 Pro Max. That may be due to the always on display or the slightly higher brightness at 1600 nits and 2000 nits at bright sunlight. And also it does have a better resolution display compared to the 13 Pro Max, but that might just be because of the slimmer bezels found on the 14 Pro Max. Now, Apple did introduce new safety features with the 14 Pro. So we do have crash detection, which basically Apple has implemented new gyroscope and G-force sensors on the iPhone 14 series, so you'll be able to detect whenever you have a car crash. Another feature would be the emergency SOS via satellite, which has not been introduced in Singapore yet, so we can't really test it out. So these are the two new features that Apple introduced. Now let's talk about some of the major camera upgrades that the iPhone 14 Pro series has. Now the iPhone 14 series does have a brand new 48 megapixel main camera. Now fun fact is that Apple actually hasn't increased the megapixel count ever since the iPhone 6s. So it has been a long while since Apple increased the megapixel count from 12 megapixel to 48 megapixel. Now what does that 48 megapixel camera do? Now it does allow you to have sharper photos and better low light performance. Apple also improved the telephoto lens and the ultra wide with better low light performance thanks to the new introduction of the Photonic engine, which is basically what Apple has built upon last year's Deep Fusion, which is baked into software. So we will definitely see improvements in the photos, as you can see right here. However, using it in real life, the difference really isn't too much. Yes, the iPhone 14 Pro Max does produce brighter overall photos. However, it does seem at broad daylight, if you're shooting just straight at the scenery, you pretty much be getting the same exact picture unless you pixel peep. Now if you're shooting at Pro RAW, then you'll be able to take full advantage of the all new 48 megapixel main camera. Now as you can see in the photos right here, the 48 megapixel shot does look more detailed and more sharper compared to the 12 megapixel photo that the 13 Pro Max has shot. Now I will be spending more time with the two cameras and finding out which one does have the overall better camera and whether it is worth upgrading from the 13 Pro to the 14 Pro solely based on the camera. So do subscribe to my channel to stay tuned for the latest updates on the cameras. So with the new larger sensor, you also have better shallow depth of field when you're taking photos, so you don't really have to default to the portrait mode whenever you're taking photos close up. And also it does have improved autofocus with the second gen 100% autofocus pixels. So now let's talk about the telephoto lens. Apple did introduce a new 2x optical zoom. So what Apple did is basically the 48 megapixel main camera, it takes the middle 12 megapixel of the quad pixel sensor and basically use that sensor to produce a optical quality 2x zoom. And what it does is that it does improve the 2x optical photo, as you can see in the photos right here. So it does seem that the 2x zoom is much better on the 14 Pro compared to the 13 Pro series. Now the ultra wide camera is also improved with better low light performance, and as you can see in this macro shot, it does seem to be more detailed on the 14 Pro compared to the 13 Pro series. Now the front facing camera also gained some improvements. So it went from f2.2 aperture to f1.9 aperture. What does that mean? Basically better low light performance whenever you're shooting in night conditions. So that is definitely a great feature whenever you want to take selfies at night. Also improved is that you finally have autofocus on the front facing camera, so you're able to take your selfies without having to worry about your face being out of focus. The cinematic mode that Apple introduced last year has been bumped from 1080p to 4K 30 frames per second now, so you'll be able to shoot your cinematic video in 4K 30 frames per second. Now this is great because personally I've been using the cinematic mode feature a lot whenever I'm using the 13 Pro series. So right now I'm shooting 4K and that is definitely a big plus. Now of course with the new sensor and the shadow depth of field, maybe this year I don't really have to use cinematic mode as much, but I will still try to use it during the camera comparison, and from initial thoughts it does seem that the improvements is quite huge compared to last year's model. Now this year Apple also introduced action mode. What it is that you basically be able to record super steady video. Now this is something that Samsung has actually introduced a couple of years ago, but it has stuck at a 1080p quality, so no one really bothered to use it. However, Apple did implement it a little bit differently. You'll be able to record at 2.8K this time, and it does seem that whenever I'm running, the videos really seem very steady compared to a normal video where it does seem a bit shaky. So that's a feature that I probably will use if I'm doing some massive running exercise or going on hiking where the roads might be a bit too jumpy, and super steady mode will definitely work for this scenario. So that is also a good feature to have, but probably won't be using too much apart from the camera comparison video. Now, battery life hasn't really been tested so far. I mean, I've been only using the 14 Pro Max for a couple of hours, but from initial testing, it does seem that the 14 Pro Max has a slightly worse battery life compared to the iPhone 13 Pro Max. But I'll give you guys an update pretty soon, probably in a week or two, and I'll probably conclude on how the battery life is like, so stay tuned. So the iPhone 14 Pro starts at 1,649 Singapore dollars and $1,799 for the Pro Max model. Now, with these prices, it's definitely on the upper echelon on phone models, so it's definitely pretty expensive for a smartphone. However, if you're looking for a great display of any smartphone, the dynamic island, if you're feeling it, and always on display, and a all-around overall great camera system, then you should upgrade to the 14 Pro or the Pro Max. Otherwise, if you don't really bother about these features, then stick with your old iPhone. I do think that iOS 16 does seem to elevate the entire experience for your old iPhones. It does have new lock screen with new widgets, as well as being able to copy and paste photos straight from your photo gallery, and also be able to do live text straight from your video. So that is a great new feature to have, and any iPhone from the iPhone 8 series should be able to upgrade to iOS 16. So for my wish list, I do hope that Apple do continue to improve the dynamic island, and it's not just a one-off feature for the iPhone 14 Pro series. I also do hope that Apple finally introduce 8K recording, maybe, but with better stabilization and implement it better than the Samsungs. Also, finally, please Apple, add USB-C to the next iPhone. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching. If you do enjoy this video, do sub to my channel, like this video, turn on the bell notification icon so you don't miss my next camera comparison video, which should be coming out in a week or two. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I shall see you guys in my next video. Take care and goodbye.